Okay, with the writer director of the feature film The Flesh People, Keshav is with us.
Keshav.
Keshav is with us. I totally apologize.
It's all good.
You're from Brooklyn, New York. It's a New
Mhm.
York City film. It's a horror comedy. Is it a horror first and then a comedy, or is it a comedy then a horror?
You know what? When I was writing it, I was kind of viewing it as a horror first, and then I think in the edit, I just kind of realized it's actually more so a comedy with kind of underlying horror, or like the horror aspects kind of buoying it in a
Yeah.
way. So I think I initially wrote it as a horror, and then it just became or like horror first and then comedy, and now I think it's more comedy first and then horror.
All right, so I'll give the synopsis. I'll give my summary of it. So you got two guys who are living in New York City. You know, it's a lot of stress going on. I live there, so you live there now. They come up with a money-making scheme to perform underground surgeries, which is pretty cool. But then they start end up serving human meat to unsuspecting customers, which is a little dark and kind of creepy.
Yeah,
Is that a good summary?
couldn't have said it better myself.
With the comedic tone. It's always a comedic. So we're taking the film seriously, but it's still funny at the same time because we live in this insane world that we live in now.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really something I was trying to get with the actors is this idea that like trust that what is happening is innately comedic, and to you guys it is deadly serious, right? So I think that was kind of just like an overall kind of guiding light throughout, at least like the production of it is, yeah, for everybody in the film, like, yeah, this is deadly, deadly serious for them, right?
Yeah,
And
exactly.
basically
Yeah,
telling them like, leave the comedy
yeah,
to me, right? You take it as a drama.
yeah, exactly. They're grounded in reality, but the tone and the spin that the way you're shooting it is that it's funny from our perspective watching it. Yeah, I totally get it.
Mhm.
Thematically, is there something you're trying to say with this film?
I think like so much. So I wrote this script back in 2022, and I was trying to like kind of channel how I was feeling during 2020. Which like this pandemic, happened right after I graduated my undergrad, and so I think I just had this feeling of like being stuck in a place and having that insecurity of like, oh my God, the idea I had for like how my life is going to turn out suddenly got upended, right? And
Yeah.
kind of being stuck in one place, these thoughts kind of kept like running through my mind. And so I think I was just trying to channel that feeling of insecurity that I had in that moment. And the idea being what is basically like the worst possible scenario for this insecurity to kind of manifest to light. I think a lot of it comes from this idea of like we tie so much of our own personal value to these ideas of success, right? And success from like how it is often stated from like kind of society around us, like career success, right? And so it's this idea of like, well, what happens if you tie your entire identity or you tie your entire value to feeling successful, right? What's kind of the worst places that this can kind of push you to?
So so you went to Chapman University. We've
Yeah,
shown a few films from there, more than a few films from there. And so you're from California originally, right? You grew up in California.
originally, yeah, California.
So what brings you to New York now? I'm just curious.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's one of those things where, after I graduated, I lived in LA for about a year. And okay, well, first things first, the driving killed me. So that's
The
really one of the
what?
big things that the driving in LA just killed me. So that was one of the big things that kind
Yeah.
of pushed me out. And I had friends of mine who worked in film living in New York City and always loved New York City, so much through like the films that I've seen of it. And like I always dreamed of being able to make movies in New York City. I mean, some of my favorite movies are New York City set, right? Mean Streets, and Taxi Driver, some of my favorite movies, The French Connection, and so on. And so I think like there was this idea of like, yeah, no, I just really want to make movies within this city more than anything else. There's just such kind of a unique atmosphere to it that, is so unique to this place. And then again, like the idea that like I already had, people I knew that were living here and working in, the kind of independent film industry here. I just kind of decided to take that opportunity, and move here. Yeah.
So that's so interesting because it's like you're like you just when you reference like 70s films, but you're born in the 90s, right? So You referenced
Yeah.
like three quintessential 70s films that are about New York City. And then so, but what I'm curious about your perspective, like when did you start getting into like watching older films and kind of getting into film yourself?
Honestly, a lot of it came from like because I really started getting into like film in all sorts when I was in high school. And oddly enough, it was because I always had trouble sleeping. I can never sleep properly. And so I would just be up until like 2 or 3 or sometimes 4 in the morning.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, I might as well just start watching movies. What else am I going to do? Try to fall asleep. It's not going to happen. And so I kind of use that as like this opportunity to, really kind of start diving into films. And I think, kind of starting with like the, classic 90s stuff, like Reservoir Dogs and Boogie Nights and so on. I think just the more I watch movies, the more I kind of had this hungering for like more and more different types of movies, if that makes sense. Kind of trying to
Yeah.
see kind of a broader breadth of experience. Um, and yeah, I think like the stuff that really, stood out to me like in high school was this kind of new Hollywood stuff of the 70s. Um, I think like that's just such a unique point in American history, or American film history, is this idea that like you could have challenging material and kind of an auteur's perspective, but like on a scale, right? And I feel like, when I was just first kind of discovering this sort of thing when I was a teenager, seeing that kind of contrast was so interesting to me. Because, in my mind, it was either like one or the other, right? It's either the, you know, difficult, challenging, a kind of, yeah, auteur's dramas or like the big Hollywood stuff.
Yeah.
And I think like this new Hollywood stuff, the new Hollywood of the 70s, like it really was just kind of like beautiful meshing of the two that I think like in the 90s there was like kind of some attempts to kind of bring that back in some ways, but like never really the same as it was back in the 70s.
Yeah, no, I get it. It's like this, the 90s were like the birth of like the film festival, getting like independent films because technology was coming.
Yeah.
It wasn't like the 2000s, but technology was coming kind of more open and like people, the birth of independent films and the auteur kind of filmmaker was coming back a little bit, I guess, right? Like, like P.T. Anderson and like
Sure.
Soderbergh, right? And like, right. So you had that Wes Anderson, like you had that kind of new age kind of filmmaker coming up, right? But then this kind of like the 70s, and then like Star Wars happened, and then Spielberg happened and became more
Right.
of, yeah, which it
But
is,
yeah,
that's what
I
it
mean,
is now. But if you were being honest with each other, right? Like it's
totally.
very much
Totally.
producers, let's make money medium now, right? So
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and I think like one of the things I was just so fascinated by, like a lot of the 70s movies too, is it was kind of the first time I recognized that there was a language that could be spoken through the camera, right? Like, I was aware of like, a unique style through like the screenwriting or the dialogue or so on. But this idea that like you can have your own grammar just through visuals and just through the edit. I mean, I remember like when I watched like Taxi Driver for the first time, and
yeah.
you got those like neon bleached out, nighttime New York City scenes. Like it felt like prose, but through the lens of the camera itself. And it's kind of like, yeah, again, like the first time I kind of realized, oh, there is a voice that exists outside of just the writing of it, right?
Yeah. No, it's cool. Yeah. It's so you kind of like I just watched it last week actually, Taxi Driver.
It's amazing, right?
Because it was leaving Netflix, and I'm like, I'm gonna watch it. Well, I've watched it like 30 times, right? It was my
Yeah.
film. Like, I totally get that film. I totally get it. And maybe it tells you a lot about myself. I don't know, but yeah, I get it. Yeah. But it's sometimes, but you know what's interesting about that film and films is that the lens is like my perspective is different, right? Is that when I was watching it in my 20s, now I'm watching it later on, like 25 years later, I realized, oh, he's a complete racist, right?
Oh yeah. No, he's
And
a
I didn't
complete thing.
realize that when I was ignorant myself. I didn't even realize that in my 20s. But watching it the other day, I was like, oh my God, he's a total racist, right?
Totally,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, yeah, no, it was totally the same thing for me. Like again, watching it in high school,
Yeah.
I was just so much more drawn by like the bleak atmosphere of it and the
Yeah.
kind of pervasive feeling of loneliness. And then yeah, rewatching it later in my life, I mean, I think when I first initially watched it, like there was always that kind of feeling of like, oh, there is really something wrong with this guy, but I couldn't quite put my
Yeah.
finger on it. And then it really kind of emerged more and more for me of like, yeah, this like the bigotry of it, his racism and his misogyny and his homophobia, and realizing, oh, that's what was like unsettling to me as a high schooler that I couldn't quite put my finger on.
Yeah, yeah. That's cool. Yeah. All right, so let's get to your film for a second. So now you see where you kind of come from. You got nicely education. You're kind of like it's almost like a lot of the New York films is like you kind of have a like you're not from there, you're not a native.
Yeah.
So it's like if you ever watch Midnight Cowboy, another New York film, Schlesinger's from the UK. He kind of looked
Hmm.
at the New York from a very different perspective. And
Yeah.
I'm saying that kind of with you too, right? Like we're like you're not a native, right? So you're
Right.
seeing it from your lens of a West Coast kind of kid, I guess.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, and I think it's kind of why also like the two protagonists are also like outsiders to the city
Yeah,
as well, right? I think like, I think when you move anywhere, like whether it's the city or like literally anywhere, you always kind of have that initial feeling of like, oh, I feel like I'm an outsider. I feel like I'm kind of locked away from this world. I think the longer you live in a place, the more kind of ingrained you become into it. But I think kind of the loneliness of feeling like an outsider, I wanted to kind of show that through the characters as well. Like they are literally locked away from the world outside of them, right? They are just
yeah.
kind of stuck in this apartment. And so the idea of them also being outsiders to the city, I think I just kind of related a lot to. Yeah,
So this is your first feature film, correct?
it's my first feature. Yeah.
How does it feel to get that out of your system? Get that first feature out of your system?
Weird. It felt very well. It was just one of those things where it's like it's the kind of thing you kind of fantasize and dream about when you're younger, and now it actually feels like a reality. And yeah, I mean, it feels so satisfying. I feel like I was just kind of holding this breath in for like years, and kind of finally am able to kind of exhale. But it is also like it is very surreal in that way. Yeah.
So then, it looks like you got some money on it. Like, how was the producer's hat, like funding it and like getting everything going
Yeah.
that way?
So, I mean, I was very lucky actually in this regard because like we were able to get something of a budget for it. I was working with this company, that basically is kind of putting together this idea of like an online educational platform. I was kind of helping them put together a filmmaking course, and the CEO of the company, he was aware that I was, in filmmaking and
Yeah.
trying to get like a feature off the ground, and was like, this is gonna actually be really good for us if you have a feature, right? Like that's going to give us like a lot more credibility, and we can incorporate like a behind the scenes for the feature, incorporate that into the program as well. And so like it really fell in my lap in that way, but I was very lucky. That's how I was actually able to get the funding for it.
Oh, wow. That's great. That's amazing. Okay, so then what about your team? Bringing your team together. So basically you got Sylvia, who's your producer, and then
Hmm.
Emmett's your cinematographer. I gotta admit, it's really great. Your production design, your art direction's fantastic. Got a lot of long shots in your film, and probably I don't know, it works for the thematic of the film, but probably good for budget as well. But really nice costume design, nice like overall aesthetic in your
Yeah.
film. Did you work with your production designer in the past? I'm just curious about that.
You know what's great? So, I was first things first looking for a producer, and yeah, so I was just kind of looking through kind of like platforms where people are advertising their producing expertise, like online. I found Sylvia, I really liked her work, connected with Sylvia. Sylvia then started connecting me with other people, basically. Sylvia connected me with Emmett. Sylvia, who was the cinematographer, Sylvia connected me with Yolanda, the production designer, the costume designer, Aisha, who a different friend of mine knew and connected me with, the prosthetics artist Beatrice, a different friend of mine knew and connected me with. So it was really just like a lot of kind of like degrees of separation. And but yeah, Sylvia was really kind of like the foundation, I think, of the entire
Yeah.
cast and crew, the whole thing. Um, I will say the big exception was Louise Heller, who played Geraldine, our co-lead, who we cast almost like in a weird way accidentally. um, I remember we were trying to cast the college counselor role, and we put that on Backstage. And I knew Louise beforehand. She was actually my coworker, or is my coworker at
Mhm.
the Tenement Museum, which is my day job. And she applied, and at work, I was like, "Oh, Louise, it's so funny that you applied to my movie." And she went, "What movie? What are you talking about?" And didn't realize it was my film. And so, we
So
cast
she's
her.
probably
She's
applying to a
amazing,
lot of things and like, yeah, yeah, yeah,
totally. And she's like a very seasoned theater actor in
yeah.
particular. But we cast her for the counselor at first. We had somebody else as the Geraldine role. That person dropped out, and initially the role of Geraldine was a different name, was a man. So he
Okay.
dropped out. And I asked Louise, like, "Oh, hey, is there anyone you would recommend, for the film? We're trying to find a different actor." And she said, "Honestly, I don't, but if you're willing to make the character a woman, I'd like to drop my hat in the ring." And so I kind of stopped and kind of thought about it for a moment, and I was like, "Okay, I think I can make it work." So I rewrote a scene for her to audition from the perspective of a woman. It was the big monologue about her orgasming on stage. Sent it over to her. She auditioned. She was incredible, and so I just rewrote the entire script from the ground up with her in mind instead, basically.
Oh wow, that's really interesting that you did that. Like it kind
But
of
I'm so glad.
balances it. The film kind of balances it with her to being the having that female other role, right? So
Absolutely, and it kind of created this weird, like, kind of quasi-maternal dynamic, between the two. Um, I'm so happy that the second lead was a woman. It would have been such a sausage fest otherwise. So yeah, I think it worked. It worked out so well, and I think one of the best things that could have happened to the film, honestly, is like casting her as that second lead.
yeah, I guess the film is like there's a certain kind of anger and desperation which
Hmm.
propels them to do what they're doing, I guess, right? And you're kind
Yeah,
of setting that up in the first like 20 minutes or so, I guess, right?
yeah,
Yeah, no, it's good. And they have a big conversation with each other, and like, yeah, and there's a contrast of generations, contrast of gender, right? So
yeah, and also this kind of like different feelings of failure, right? I mean,
yeah,
Ricky, who's played by Jorge, who I cast Jorge because Louise knew him and worked with him before. Um, and Ricky has like a young man's insecurity, right? This idea of
mm,
like, you have these kind of very fantastical projections of life, and then reality kind of suddenly hits you, and
yeah,
it's kind of the first time you're engaging with that. And then yeah, with Geraldine, it's more of like the kind of slow seeping rot of like decades of failure, kind of.
yeah,
That's kind of like immersing you as well. Yeah,
yeah. The 20s, I'm a failure perspective is like when someone you're in your 20s, but basically I'm like, come on, give me a break. You got
right,
so
right.
much life ahead of you. It's like get off your horse
No,
and stop.
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm the ancient age of 29,
Yeah,
but like even like thinking back on like my young 20s, I'm like, what was I freaking out about? Like there was
yeah,
so many more years left. But I think in your young 20s, like you can't even perceive that, right? Like you struggle to perceive 10, 20, 30 years from
yeah.
then. I think like yeah, like something wrong happens to you when you're 23, you're like, oh my God, it's the end of the world, because you just haven't had as much experience of like, okay, picking up the pieces and starting up again.
I just like the idea of like this guy who wants to be a doctor kind of doing surgery. I just like, yeah. I don't know why. I just kind of like, because I'm sure that happens. I'm sure that's happening, right? So,
I'm sure it's happening
yeah.
somewhere. Yeah.
Yeah, in the underground world, right? Where like someone's
Yeah.
doing underground operations, right? So,
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I think, a lot of this idea of like underground surgery, I mean, specifically the idea was underground surgery for people who couldn't afford actual medical
yeah.
care, right? I mean, I think in that way it makes it like very American in that regard, right?
Yeah.
Most people
As a
can't afford medical
Canadian, like that's like I can't believe you don't have universal. It doesn't make any sense to us that you don't have
care. It's
universal health
insane.
care,
it's
right?
it's it's medieval. It's medieval. No, it's so funny. I mean, I remember
Yeah.
like sometime back I was watching the David Cronenberg film Crash, and they
Yeah.
but people like yeah colliding in car accidents, and then they get horribly injured and they go to the hospital. And I remember watching. I'm like, how can they afford all these hospital bills? And then I was like, oh wait, they're Canadian. Of course they can.
Yeah. Well, listen, there is abuse, right? Like
Yeah,
using
sure, yeah.
addiction, but it happens everywhere, right? Like someone's
Mhm,
addicted to drugs, they'll kind of try to get it off of the hospital. It's very common,
mhm.
right? But you know what I mean? Like it's like, listen, like I remember like my wife, my first kid, my she had an emergency C-section.
Yeah,
And this is what I do. So I'm not like I have like I'm like self-employed, so I'm not like I have coverage anywhere else. Like that would have cost me
yeah.
like $50,000 if I was
Right,
born in the States, right? Like that
right.
would have sunk me, you know what I mean? That's like crazy, right? So
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
yeah. But it's sort of like that's what the I always felt that that's sort of what the zaniness of this film was about, right? Because you're living in this rich, prosperous city, right?
Hmm.
Right?
The
That's what
richest
you're I
country in
was
the
thinking
world,
your
and
mayor is a
yet,
socialist now. He should be getting universal health care. But go ahead,
I
yeah.
mean, fingers crossed. Hopefully one day, right? Come
Yeah.
on, Sauron, please.
But that's the irony, right? It's like you live in
Yeah,
this there's billionaires literally living in your city with these like
right.
crazy apartments and this crazy wealth, right? And then people have to do this, right?
I mean, there's it was one of those things where it's like there are so many different New York cities within New York City.
Yeah, there is, yeah.
Like everyone experiences the city in such a different way that it almost feels like a different planet.
It is. It's all it's all tiny little everybody's a
Yeah,
subway away, right? Like,
yeah, yeah.
yeah. And then you got the UN there too, right? Which is not really,
Mhm.
the world is there as well, right? Yeah.
Right, right. I mean, it's just one of those things. Everyone's kind of it's a weird thing about the city that I've really noticed is that like at like the same time, like yeah, everyone is kind of in their own specific pockets, right? Their own little world of the city. And yet at the same time, all these pockets are weirdly enough, I feel like always kind of 6 degrees of separation from each other.
Yeah.
And that's like very, very weird. I mean, that's like not something that I'm used to that I've really noticed is people are so different and yet somehow they're all kind of connected to each other.
100, well, that's the United States in a nutshell, right? So,
Yeah, yeah,
right, everybody's an immigrant, right?
yeah,
Which, let's be honest, right? So,
yeah,
yeah,
100%, 100%.
yeah. Except for the obviously the people who was
Right,
land
except
taken away
unless you're
from.
indigenous, right? Yeah, everyone
Yeah.
is ultimately an immigrant or immigrant
Yeah.
descent,
No, but
right?
you know
At
what
the
I
end of the
mean,
day.
right? So everybody like that's the irony of it. It's like everybody kind of has that.
Well,
Anyways, there's a lot going on.
it's a country essentially of outsiders trying to become insiders, right?
Yeah. Well, that's what happens, right? That's what, and then when you become the insider, there's this selfishness where like you
Yeah,
don't want anybody else in, right? So
right, right.
yeah, which that's what you see, right? So yeah,
Totally. I mean, it's always that kind of the any like anti-immigrant sentiments, people going, ah, I came to this country slightly earlier than you did, right? And
yeah,
yeah.
exactly. But this is human nature, though. It's not just in the United States. It's just a
Mhm.
it's like through history, right?
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Like you're first generation Indian American, right?
Yeah, yeah. My parents came here from India in like the late 70s.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like it's fair to say that there's a class system in India, right?
Absolutely,
Yeah.
100%. Yeah,
Yeah.
very, very concretized class system. I
Yeah.
mean, in the same way that I think America actually also has a very concretized class system. I think they're just better at like kind of hiding it, how obvious it is in some
Yeah.
ways.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, no, I mean, India has its own very concretized class/caste system as well. Absolutely.
Yeah. The one argument I can make is that perhaps if you're poor in the United States, you have a better chance of kind of like succeeding, right? So
Right. I mean, you have that feeling of like, okay, there is still something I can kind of
there's
aspire
something,
to,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you just have a good idea, you can kind of like
Mhm.
you can understand, you know what I mean? There's like the very little regulation that
Well, in that way too, it's like, you know, to kind of tie it back to the film, right?
yeah.
There is this kind of feeling between these two characters of like, I am just like one big breakaway.
Yeah, this is all about the film. This is all the what's going on in the film,
Yeah,
right?
it
So
really is. Yeah.
yeah, that's what I'm trying. That's what I'm getting at, right?
But
So
yeah,
yeah.
I mean, like, yeah, they have that feeling of like, yeah, I am just one big breakaway. I just got to do this one thing, and then all my
Yeah.
issues are gone, and I can, kind of rise to the top.
Yeah.
But the tragedy of it is that they kind of destroy themselves along the way of trying to find that big break.
'Cause, yeah, this is not the end game. I'm going to do this so I can get there, right?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
yeah. Okay. Let's talk. I want to get the cinematography in a second, but I want to talk about
Yeah,
the makeup and the makeup design. Like there's some pretty graphic scenes, like an eyeball pops out. Tell me about kind of getting the makeup person and make it's so realistic too. That's what I'm saying.
yeah.
The overall production design is very, I know the budget, it's very limited budget. It's fantastic. So tell me about like who got this team together? This like all these the costume and the makeup
Yeah.
person. It's great.
So our prosthetics artist, her name is Beatrice Sniper, who a coworker of mine at the Tenement Museum actually connected me with her. Um, she is one of the most absurdly talented people I've ever met in my life. Like it is, like I've seen some of her work before. I'm like, okay, like and you clearly know what you're doing. You're clearly very competent. And then seeing the stuff that she brought in, like I was genuinely blown away by how insanely talented she is. It was one of those things where, talking with her, I was very, very insistent that all of the effects will be practical. I'm very proud to say we have no CGI at all
Yeah.
whatsoever in the film. And, I think she really understood that too. And she was really able to step up. And, it was so much fun because there was this idea of like, the tactility of it is the most important thing, right? So many things in the movie that are happening are so out there and so surreal and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Um, but you got to believe it, right, in that moment. This idea of really focusing on the practical effects, right, of all the fake blood, the scene where his organs are being split in half, even though it's a dream sequence, I wanted it to feel real. By the way, that's a combination of silicone and rubber, but also some like actual like animal organs that we were able to find as
Yeah.
well. Yeah, I mean, you have to believe it. The more unrealistic the gore gets, the more the audience needs to be pushed to believe it actually existing, right?
Yeah.
I mean, the prosthetics is like that, and yeah, I mean, the production design was like that too. I mean, we didn't shoot this on a set. I mean, partially because of budgetary reasons, but also the idea that like I really wanted to shoot in a actual place that like feels like we shot this on like a floor of like a duplex, but like wanted it to feel like an apartment
Yeah.
that is stifling and feels claustrophobic and well, very claustrophobic
So
for
you
us
didn't
doing
shoot in
it.
an apartment because it feels like an apartment.
It was like the second floor of a duplex, basically.
Okay.
It was this like yeah, how like duplex in Flushing, Queens. But yeah, I mean, it ultimately feels like an apartment, and we were definitely getting like cabin fever at a certain point shooting it. But this idea of it being so tight and claustrophobic, like you won't be able to replicate that on a set where you can just move the walls and you can kind of sit back and you get the air conditioning, you get the coffee. Um, it even really influenced a lot of the cinematography. We were using a lot of these really wide angle lenses for the film. We weren't planning on doing that. We weren't
Yeah.
planning on using this many crazy wide angle close ups. We had to
Because
because
of
the
the
spaces
yeah.
were so tight that we literally would not be able to see anything if we were
Yeah.
using like a longer lens. And then it becomes like a stylistic thing, right?
Yeah.
Then it starts kind of warping the whole place. And like we wouldn't have come across that if we didn't have that restriction of, insisting on shooting on location essentially.
Gotcha. Okay, so let's talk about your cinematography in your in like so obviously it's limited budget. How many days did you shoot? How many days was it anyways?
It was a total of, I want to say, a 15-day shoot.
Okay, 15 days. So 3 weeks, 15 days,
Yeah.
right? So tell me about like the shot list. Did you storyboard things? Like tell me about some really interesting lighting choices in the film. I'm just curious about your relationship. 'Cause especially, let's be
Yeah.
honest, like in a film like this, your DP is like it's your lock. You
That
need to have a good,
North
strong
North
DP.
Star.
Yeah.
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 I think what we found was like a really good process for us was preparing the hell out of it. Creating overhead diagrams, really, storyboarding it extensively, writing these very long descriptions for the shot list, and then getting to set and then just kind of throwing it all out the window and then figuring it out from there on. I think the preparation part is really, really important. I think if we didn't prepare and then we just decided to figure out there, I would, freak out and not know what to do. But also, I love that with Emmett, like he's so adaptable as a cinematographer that like we'll prepare things, we'll not necessarily be able to prepare in that location. We get to the location, and he's like, okay, the couch is set up in this way, the wall set up in this way, we only have this much space. I know we have the shot list like this, but I think maybe you should do some blocking here, and then I can readjust the shot list in this way.
Mhm.
Um, and so he was so adaptable to the kind of, like the typical kind of constraints that you have in like such a low budget production. I think even with the lighting too, like we really were relying on so many source lights. Um, and so his team was really adaptable in that regard. We were using like a lot of lamps and a lot of kind of light bulbs that we attached to it, and a couple of off-screen kind of lights as well, but mostly source lights. Um, that was a stylistic thing for one. I mean, again, this idea of we believe the place more and more, right? The more we can see the source of the lighting, right?
Mhm.
The more that this apartment feels like a real apartment and less like a kind of artificial film set. But again, also practical constraints. There's only so much room in the apartment. We can't really fit studio
Yeah,
lights right
yeah,
into the place as well. Um, but yeah, I mean that also kind of helped stylistically with the film as well. Um, the nice thing about Emmett is that he's always really good at keeping a cool head, and he's always good at kind of catching when I'm kind of spiraling. I remember there is this one scene where they're gonna go kill their first victims, Jerry and Josephine, the grandma, the grandson living in that apartment,
yeah.
and there was this kind of kind of complicated blocking between four actors, and I was really stressed out trying to figure it out. And I'm like, okay, maybe you can move 3 inches to the left, and then maybe you can take a step back. And Evan just kind of walks up to me and puts a hand on my shoulder and goes, maybe, you know, just take a step back. Let's not get super crazy in the weeds. Just have it block out how you would normally would. Don't think about the camera, and then we'll adjust after that. It's really good at just keeping me grounded in that way,
Yeah,
right? It really helps me, prevents me from getting too much of my own.
that's great. And where did you meet him?
Met him through Sylvia.
Oh, so Sylvia kind of brought everybody together, I guess, right?
Yeah, I mean, again, like Sylvia was actually ultimately kind of like the center of like all the kind of crew
That's
members that
great.
were able to kind of bring
She
together.
must have believed in you, though.
I mean, yeah, I guess so. I mean, she's incredible and like she's so committed. You know, insanely hardworking and like the thing about the producer is that a lot of their hard work, like you don't really see. They're always kind of working in the background. They're kind of always working kind of under the hood. So I'll be on set and I'll be kind of, stuck with whatever issues with logistics are coming up. Once in a while, I'll peek in and I'll see Sylvia on like a laptop, like kind of frantically kind of sorting through paperwork and things like that. I mean, she really was kind of the engine that kept the whole thing going. Like, I really feel like this whole thing would have just kind of collapsed without her.
All right, so let's talk about the post-production. So you're looking at the footage. What's your feeling? Like, I'm sure there's
So,
some insecurity, there's some confidence. Like, what's your overall feeling?
so I kind of now am aware of like what the typical emotional process is. And from what I found, I see the dailies. I'm like, oh, the dailies look so cool. The footage looks so cool. All right, let's put together this first assembly cut. And then I watch the assembly cut, and I'm like, all right, maybe I'll throw myself off a roof or something. Oh my god, I hate this.
Yeah,
Um, it's that whole idea of like, you shoot the film that you think you shot, and then you get the film that you actually shot. And then I take a step back, breathe, and then I go back to re-editing it and re-editing it and re-editing it until it kind of shapes itself into the film that it is always meant to be. But it is always like just I just know this from like other short films in the past. Always feel like the most miserable experience to watch that first cut, that
yeah.
first like assembly cut.
So you're like, so you had an editor. Like, were you around a lot? Did you give them like, how was your collaboration with Tyler?
Yeah, Tyler. I mean, Tyler, I was actually connected to through a friend of mine who, and yeah, I mean, he is like such a creative editor and, came up with so many kind of fun and unique ideas. I think, the way it worked was like we kind of, yeah, put together the assembly cut, kind of threw it together. And then I would just kind of give this very long, kind of detailed page of notes. You look
Mhm.
at them, do a re-edit. I would drop by, kind of give little things here or there, give another long giant page of notes, kind of rinse and repeat in that way. The whole
Yeah.
thing took about, I want to say, like a full year of like back and forth in regards to the initial edit of the film.
And then what about the sound design and the music? Good job.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, honestly, you should say good job to Nick, who
Yeah.
was our sound designer, because he is insanely talented.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I think Sylvia put me in contact with Nick, and I think with Nick, I had like my first call with him, and I was so happy because like I just feel like he just immediately got what was going on with the film. He immediately understood what the atmosphere was supposed to feel like. He immediately understood what the tone was supposed to feel like. And he got all together all these like kind of crazy like gore sound effects and kind of created the soundscape of the apartment. And we were talking a lot about the contrast between their apartment and everywhere else outside, how the apartment of Geraldine kind of feels like this own surreal soundscape, and then the moment they step outside, they're like, oh wait, now we're in the real world, right? A lot of that came from him, and then with the score, um, yeah, Vova Faust, it was a stage name. It was a friend of mine actually, named Vlad, and yeah, Vlad kind of put together this great recording team of live musicians. We had a pianist, we had a trumpet player, and we had a violinist.
Yeah.
And he kind of created kind of basic tracks of like kind of compositions, mostly with kind of like a MIDI. And then I was there for the session. Basically, he'd bring all together these musicians and play footage of the film. And off of that foundation that he created, they improvised so much. A lot of that score is actually improvised from those musicians.
Oh, wow.
Um, and so it creates this very kind of jazzy and free flowing experience, but also kind of very like kind of ethereal in that way. I remember talking with him and, really saying like, I don't want you to have the score tied too closely to the movie. I don't want it to be a thing where it's like, oh, the score is so tied to the rhythm of this edit, or the score is so tied to, oh, you cut to this one shot, or you cut to an actor moving, the score follows that. I didn't really want that. I almost wanted the score to almost be like a separate entity that kind of is draped over the film instead.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah. And then got it all, put it all together, and the film was done, right?
Yeah, I mean, essentially, yeah.
Yeah.
I also want to give a shout out to our colorist, Stephanie Park, who does like incredible work as well. It really kind of brought out the kind of warm, like kind of sickly glow of the apartment as well. That's, honestly, coloring, especially when you're doing digital cinematography, because digital
Yeah.
cameras, capture very, very little actual color. Like the colorist really, it has a huge, huge responsibility in so much of
Yeah.
the look. So, I mean, yeah, I really do want to give a shout out to Stephanie. She really, really killed it with that.
So then, yeah. Okay. So yeah, no, 100%. So now the film is completed. And so how do you feel?
I actually feel very happy with it. We were able to do a few private screenings, and so I was able to kind of, for the first time, watch it with the crowd, and people responded to it really strongly, which is a big relief because if you're making a film, like you're so locked into it
Yeah.
that you can start losing sense of like how it actually is going to play. So it was a relief for me to see it play well. And so yeah, now we're just kind of putting it to festivals. We're gonna start hearing back, from them like spring, summertime, and we'll see how that goes. Um, but I honestly like I'm not only am I relieved that I was able to finish this, but like I actually do feel, you know, like genuinely kind of like happy that I was able to make it,
Yeah.
like I know that like it was like a very long kind of, yeah, again, like 3.5 year process of kind of getting it off the ground. And I think, once you're in the middle of it, you kind of have to ignore how strange and surreal that it feels that you're actually having the privilege of being able to direct this feature film. And now that the whole process is over, I think it's kind of starting to sink in of how, I mean, yeah, how lucky I just really feel that I was able to do this. I think, yeah, I think the reality of how the reality of how surreal it is really is starting to set into me.
Yeah, I know it's great. And so I know it's hard to think now, but what do you think next is next for you?
I'm always writing, and I've been writing. I love writing, and I try to carve out like a little bit
Yeah.
of time every day to write. So, hopefully another feature, if we can get that off the ground. That's what I've been kind of working on, or just like a few future scripts that I want to have.
Yeah. So I saw some of your videos on your website too. You do like the video script. I know you haven't done it in a while, but There's some
Oh, you're
pretty
talking about the
innovative
wisecrack
stuff
stuff?
there. Yeah.
Are you talking about the wisecrack stuff?
Yeah, the wisecrack stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, rest in peace, wisecrack. They're not around anymore, sadly.
They're not. They got
Um,
like they got like 3 million subscribers on how can they not be
yeah.
around?
They recently decided to kind of disband. I don't know why. I'm sure there's all sorts of weird behind the scenes stuff that I'm not aware of.
Yeah.
It was cool working with them though,
That's
I
shocking that they're not around anymore because someone who's like on YouTube, you know that they're doing that's pretty good what they're doing.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's all sorts of stuff behind the scenes that I'm just not aware of. But yeah.
Yeah. Oh,
No, it was
well,
cool working for them. I love also kind of the academic and critical aspects of film. And so, getting the ability to work within that realm in any way I can is always
yeah.
great and always really fun.
Oh, it's too bad. It's too bad that they
Yeah.
did that. I thought
Yeah.
that they had a good interesting point of view on stuff.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, and they were awesome to work with too. Everyone there was very, very chill, really encouraging. So yeah, it's a bummer, but I think a lot of the people are kind of now split off and doing their own things, like a lot of the
Gotcha.
wisecrack heads. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, I just saw that the last video was 10 months ago. So,
yeah, yeah. I know one of the lead guys who's the narrator, his name's Michael Burns. He has his own kind of personal channel now that he
gotcha.
does. Yeah,
I guess the point is that you got some good stuff that you can do. You can kind of do these big projects. Obviously, this takes a lot of your time and energy, but then
yeah,
there's like this is the kind of world that we live in now, right? Like these kind of quick, innovative videos, get some traction,
totally.
get it blown up a little bit. Then it serves your film too, well, right? So
Yeah, absolutely.
that makes sense. Yeah.
I think that is also just the reality of working in the arts today is that like
Yeah.
maybe you can do the big projects, but you always have to do a million different tiny projects in between or
Yeah.
underneath, right?
Yeah. Because you seem to be a film fan too, right?
Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, that's the thing is that like all the academic stuff with the film, like that influences the production itself, right?
Yeah.
A lot of like the directorial decisions like comes from like watching films and like studying them. I remember, one of the things I was doing in school was I would rewatch October 10 Days That Shook the World by Sarah Eisenstein. And I would actually write down every single shot in that movie and how it
Yeah.
looked like and how it edited and how it contrasted with each other. Um, and so like there are aspects of the film where I like, was kind of pulling from that, right? In the way that they're using like juxtapositional montage and these
Mhm.
kind of strobe edits and things like that. I mean, I think like theory, like it's actually like really in some ways like kind of underrated for filmmakers. I think it's really important to understand the theory of not only film history but also just different forms of filmmaking and film grammar from all over the world. I mean, there's just such a vast world of cinema out there.
Yeah.
So much stuff that lies outside of Hollywood, so much stuff that lies outside of America. I mean,
Yeah.
literally all over the world you'll see movies. You'll see movies in like Indonesia and Cuba and India
Yeah.
and Russia. And like the way that like, even people speak their own language verbally, people also have their own cinematic language. It's just like kind of cracking up on an entirely new way of how people are perceiving the world. And so, like, I don't know. All this to say, like, I try to have like a very kind of varied film diet, just so I
Yeah.
can have like more and more influences I can pull from. Because I think like the more influences you have, like the better sense of like what you can get with your own style and your own voice, and your own perspective as well.
Yeah, that's a great idea. It's interesting too because from where I sit, there's a lot of films coming from for the first time ever from the Middle East. They're making a
Yeah,
lot of films now, and
yeah,
it's just a way to get out your narrative too, right? Like your perspective, right? So every culture has
absolutely.
their own perspective, right? So
100%. I mean, and it's like one of the kind of crazy things about movies is that like they're so expensive to make. They're so long. They take so long. Like it is genuinely like a big
yeah,
undertaking. And yet you'll see people who like are not in a position where they can put in the money and time and effort to make a movie, and yet they still do.
yeah,
And that's kind of astounding, right? I mean, I think back like World War II, like Italy's bombed to hell, and yet an entire Italian neorealist movement is created from that rubble. I think of like Gafar Panay, who like somehow manages to make movies despite the government telling him not to do so. I mean, Palestinians are making movies, Ukrainians are
Yeah.
making movies.
Yeah, a
Objectively,
lot
the
of films are
scenarios
coming
are,
from Ukraine. Well, that's what
yeah,
happens though, right? When it's crap with like the war, and poverty like leads to creativity, right? So
totally. I mean, and it's like, I just think like there is something within us that kind of insists on movies existing, like these don't like create our survival, and yet like they always just insist on existing no matter what. We can't help it. Like it just, it's like the chest burster from Aliens just kind of explodes out of us, whether we
yeah,
want it to or not. Um, sometimes like I kind of hear people being like, "Oh, is cinema dying? Is cinema dead? Is this the end of film or whatever?" And I really just do not believe that is the case. I don't think film will allow itself to die. And I think like you can see all those examples of people making movies in so much more trying circumstances than what I'm in, right? And
yeah.
still they're doing it. It's insane conceptually, but yeah, I mean, it really shows that like it'll always exist no matter what, as long as human beings exist, like films will exist.
Yeah. That said, to finish it off, it's a very, from a creative standpoint, it's a very young medium. So it's only
Yeah,
just over 100 years old. That's it. So
it's just over 100 years old, and then also, but then like the amount of masterpieces that are being created in about a little bit over 100 years
yeah,
is mind-boggling. Like that shouldn't happen for such a young medium, and yet there is. That's
because it has
crazy.
all the elements, it has music, visual, photography, acting,
Yeah.
storytelling, right? So it has all the elements together. So
Yeah, I mean, I think that there was just something within us that required the cinema, right? Even before film was invented, I think there was some aspect of humanity that requires cinema to exist. And the moment that it does, like, I mean, in retrospect, like, it's not surprising that there was such an explosion of how much incredible movies are being made afterwards.
yeah.
It's like this dam that's being busted open in a way.
Yeah. Well, on that note, I can't wait to see what you do next. You got the first one out of your belt. Always
Yeah.
the toughest one to do. You got it. You made a good film. It's there. It's like there forever. And so I'm looking forward to seeing what you do next.
Thanks so much. Really
Because you
appreciate
got
it.
to make another film. It's about the body of work, right? So
Exactly. It's all about
yeah.
the body of work, man. Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Let's talk when you make your next film. I appreciate your time.
Will do. Good seeing you.